Long ago, beyond 7 forests and 3 silver rivers, there stood a kingdom called Valoria. It was famous for many things. Its crystal gardens, its golden towers, its endless fields of blue flowers that shimmered beneath the moon. But above all else, Valoria was famous for its king. King Aldric the Radiant, a ruler so beloved that songs were written about him from one end of the kingdom to another. People said his wisdom brought peace, his courage brought safety, and his kindness brought prosperity. For 40 years he ruled. For 40 years the kingdom flourished, until the morning his shadow disappeared. It happened during the Festival of Suns. The entire kingdom had gathered in the capital city. Children chased ribbons through the streets, musicians filled the air with laughter and song, the great palace bells rang across the valley, and King Aldric stepped onto the palace balcony to greet his people. Thousands cheered, but then the cheering stopped. One voice screamed, then another, then hundreds. The king looked down in confusion. "What is it?" Nobody answered. They simply stared, terrified, because the king had no shadow. The morning sun blazed behind him. Every person in the square cast a shadow. Every bird, every tree, every banner, every stone. But not the king. His shadow was gone. Completely gone. Fear spread through the crowd. Ancient stories stirred. Old legends whispered. Stories everyone knew. Stories no one wanted to be true. For it was said that when a ruler loses their shadow, their soul begins to disappear. That night, King Aldric locked himself inside the royal observatory. 3 days passed, then 7, then 14. He stopped appearing in public, stopped speaking, stopped sleeping, because something far worse had begun. Every day he forgot something, a memory, a face, a name, a moment. Tiny pieces of himself vanishing, just as the old legends had warned. The kingdom's finest scholars searched for answers. The royal magicians studied ancient books. Travelers were sent to distant lands. Nobody found anything. Nobody knew where a stolen shadow could go, or how to bring it back. Until a girl named Elara arrived. Elara was 16, a thief, a wanderer, a collector of impossible things. She had stolen jewels from pirates, maps from explorers, keys from sleeping giants, and once, according to rumor, she had stolen a song from a ghost. Nobody knew how much of the rumor was true. But everyone agreed on one thing. If something could be stolen, Elara could probably find it. She arrived at Valoria carrying a weathered leather satchel and a grin that suggested trouble was never very far away. The palace guards stopped her immediately. "State your business." Elara looked up at the towering palace. "I heard your king lost something." The guards exchanged glances. "What of it?" She smiled. "I specialize in finding things." Normally, they would have thrown her out, but desperate kingdoms make desperate choices, and Valoria had become desperate indeed. So they brought her before the king. The royal observatory stood at the highest point of the palace, a room filled with ancient star maps and silver telescopes, and there, standing alone beneath a great glass dome, was King Aldric. Elara's smile faded. The king looked old, not merely elderly, ancient, as though years were being stolen from him, one memory at a time. His eyes met hers, tired, fading. "You are the thief." Elara bowed dramatically. "Only on special occasions." To her surprise, the king laughed, just a little. Then he became serious again. "You believe you can find my shadow?" Elara considered the question. "I don't know." The king sighed. At least she was honest. Then Elara noticed something strange. The king's reflection. A polished silver telescope stood nearby. Its metal surface reflected the room, the king, the stars, everything. Everything except one thing. In the reflection, something moved, a dark shape standing directly behind the king. A shadow, not attached to anyone, watching him, watching her. And then it smiled. Elara's blood turned cold, because shadows aren't supposed to smile, especially when they no longer belong to anyone. The shadow slowly raised one finger, pointing toward the night sky, toward a single black star hanging among the heavens, a star darker than darkness itself, a star that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago. Then the shadow vanished. The reflection became normal. But Elara knew what she had seen, and deep inside she felt the first whisper of a mystery far older than a stolen shadow. A mystery that was waiting for her, high above the world, among the stars. The black star remained in Elara's thoughts long after she left the observatory. It shouldn't have existed. She knew enough about the night sky to know that. Travelers depended on stars. Sailors trusted them. Even thieves occasionally used them when escaping from angry palace guards. Stars did not simply appear, especially not stars darker than the darkness around them, and yet she had seen it. More importantly, the king's missing shadow had pointed directly toward it. That night, Elara climbed to the highest rooftop in Valoria. The city slept below her. Lanterns flickered softly along narrow streets. The palace towers gleamed silver beneath the moon, and high above, the black star waited, perfectly still, perfectly wrong. Elara opened her satchel. Inside were dozens of strange items collected during years of wandering. A compass that pointed towards secrets, a key that opened locks that didn't exist, a bottle containing a captured thunderstorm, and, wrapped carefully in blue cloth, a silver spyglass. She lifted it to her eye. The moment she looked through it, the world changed. The ordinary stars vanished. The moon disappeared. The sky itself seemed to peel away, revealing another sky hidden behind it. A hidden world, a hidden night. And there, directly beneath the black star, hung a city. Elara nearly dropped the spyglass. The city floated upside down among the heavens. Its streets were woven from moonlight. Its buildings seemed carved from darkness itself. Thousands of lanterns glowed blue along floating bridges, and strange ships sailed through the air as if it were water. At the center stood an enormous marketplace, crowded, busy, alive. Elara whispered one word: "Impossible." A voice answered, "No." She spun around. An old woman sat on the chimney behind her, as if she had always been there. She wore a cloak stitched from feathers. Silver eyes gleamed beneath her hood, and perched on her shoulder sat a white owl. "The word you're looking for," said the woman, "is hidden."
Elara instinctively reached for the dagger at her belt. The woman laughed. "If I meant you harm, child, you would already be dead." Fair point. Slowly, Elara relaxed. "Who are you?" The old woman smiled.
My name is Morrigan. How long have you been sitting there? Long enough to know you're planning something reckless. Elara grinned. Then you've met me properly. Morrigan sighed. Unfortunately. Then her expression darkened. You saw the shadow market. Not a question, a statement. Elara nodded. The city beneath the black star? Morrigan's silver eyes narrowed. One of the oldest places in existence. The wind suddenly grew colder. A place where lost things are sold. Elara frowned. Lost things? Memories. A pause. Dreams? Another pause. Names? The old woman's voice lowered. And shadows. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. The king's shadow. The answer was there. She could feel it. Then that's where I'm going. Morrigan immediately shook her head. No. Why not? Because nobody enters the shadow market and leaves unchanged. The old woman's owl shifted nervously. Even it seemed uncomfortable. Morrigan continued. Everything has a price there. Elara smirked. I've dealt with merchants before. Not like these. The old woman's expression grew serious. The merchants beneath the black star don't want gold. The wind stopped. The city seemed strangely silent. They want pieces of you. Elara's smile faded. Pieces? Morrigan nodded. A cherished memory. A forgotten dream. A year of your life. A part of your soul. The words hung heavily in the air. Then the old woman leaned forward, and if the rumors are true, her silver eyes reflected the black star. The king's shadow was purchased by someone very powerful. Elara felt her stomach tighten. Who? Morgan looked toward the heavens, toward the hidden city floating beneath the black star, and for the first time, fear entered her voice. The Shadow King. Silence. Even the wind seemed unwilling to speak. The ruler of the market, the collector of stolen shadows, the one being who has never lost a bargain. Far above them, the black star pulsed, once, slowly, like a heartbeat. And somewhere within the hidden city, something ancient opened its eyes. Because the Shadow King already knew Elara was coming, and unlike King Aldric, he still possessed his shadow. In fact, he possessed thousands. 3 nights later, Elara left Valoria. She traveled alone, not because she lacked companions, but because every friend she had ever made eventually learned the same lesson. When Elara decided to chase a mystery, nothing short of a collapsing mountain could stop her. And even then, the mountain would probably have to try twice. Morrigan accompanied her only as far as the edge of the whispering forest. The old woman stood beneath the trees, her white owl perched on her shoulder. The moonlight made her silver eyes glow. You still have time to turn back. Elara adjusted her satchel. No. Morrigan sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. The old woman reached into her cloak and produced a small silver coin. It was unlike any coin Elara had ever seen. One side showed a moon. The other showed a closed eye. What's this? A passage token. Morrigan pressed it into her hand. The shadow market appears only to those carrying an invitation. Elara turned the coin over. It felt strangely cold. "And if I lose it?" The old woman smiled grimly. "Then pray you never find the market." The answer somehow managed to be both mysterious and unhelpful, very much like Morrigan. Before Elara could ask another question, the old woman spoke again. "One more thing." Her voice grew serious. "When you enter the market," the owl shifted uneasily, "do not make promises." Elara frowned. "What kind of advice is that?" "The kind that may save your life." Morgan's eyes darkened. "In that place, words have weight." The forest fell silent. "A promise is not merely spoken there." The old woman lowered her voice. "It becomes real." A cold chill slid down Elara's spine. Then Morgan stepped backwards into the shadows of the trees and vanished, as though she had never been there at all. Elara stared for several seconds, then muttered, "Everyone I meet gets stranger," and continued her journey. By midnight, she reached the cliffs beyond the kingdom. The black star hung directly overhead, larger now, darker now, waiting. The silver coin suddenly grew warm in her hand. A low humming filled the air. The sea below began to glow. Moonlight gathered across the water, forming a bridge. Not stone, not wood, pure moonlight, stretching upward into the sky itself.
Elara stared, then smiled. This is definitely a terrible idea, and stepped onto the bridge. The journey felt impossible. She climbed higher and higher, above clouds, above storms, above the world, until finally she reached the city beneath the black star, the Shadow Market, and immediately understood why legends feared it. The place was enormous. Crowded streets twisted in impossible directions. Buildings leaned sideways. Bridges floated unsupported through the air. Lanterns burned with blue flames. Thousands of creatures wandered the market. Humans, spirits, giants, travelers made from living smoke, merchants with clockwork faces, women whose hair flowed like rivers of stars. Everywhere Elara looked, bargains were being made, but not for gold. A merchant exchanged a ruby necklace for someone's happiest memory. Another sold bottled dreams. A young man traded 10 years of his future for a magical sword. An old woman purchased the memory of her first heartbreak. The market buzzed with transactions, and every transaction seemed wrong somehow, as if people were selling pieces of themselves without fully understanding their value. Elara gripped her satchel tightly. Find the shadow. That was the mission, nothing else. Then she saw something that stopped her cold. A shop, tiny, narrow. Its shelves were filled with shadows, thousands of them, shadows trapped inside crystal jars. Some danced, some slept, some cried. One shadow even appeared to be trying to escape. Elara's stomach twisted. The king's shadow might be here, or somewhere nearby. She stepped closer, and the shopkeeper smiled. A terrible smile, because the shopkeeper had no shadow of his own. "Looking for something?" His voice was smooth as silk. Elara forced herself to remain calm. "Perhaps." The shopkeeper's eyes gleamed. "We sell many things." His long fingers tapped a nearby jar. "A lost childhood?" Tap. A forgotten love. Tap. A stolen shadow. Elara's pulse quickened. King Aldric of Valoria. The smile vanished. Instantly, the merchant's face went pale. For one brief second, fear appeared in his eyes. Real fear. Then he looked nervously around. "Lower your voice." Elara leaned forward. "You know where it is." The merchant swallowed. Everyone nearby suddenly seemed interested in other things. No one was listening, and yet everyone looked afraid. Finally, the merchant whispered, "The king's shadow isn't for sale." "Why?" The merchant glanced towards the center of the city, towards a distant black palace rising above the market. A palace so dark it seemed carved from the black star itself. And at its highest tower, something moved. A figure standing by a window, watching the market, watching her. Even from this distance she could feel its gaze. Ancient, patient, dangerous. Then the merchant whispered something that made her blood run cold. "He has been waiting for that shadow for 40 years. 40 years, exactly the length of Aldric's reign. Elara frowned. Why? The merchant's face paled further. His voice became almost inaudible. Because the king was never supposed to become king. Silence. The market suddenly felt much colder. "What are you talking about?" The merchant stepped backward, as though he already regretted speaking. "The Shadow King says a mistake was made." The Black Palace loomed over the city, and far away in its highest tower, the figure continued watching, waiting. The stolen shadow contains a secret. The merchant's hands trembled. A secret hidden since the day Aldric was born. Elara's heart pounded. What secret? The merchant looked directly into Elara's eyes and whispered, "The king has a twin." The Black Palace seemed to darken. The Shadow King is his brother. A bell suddenly rang across the market, deep, ancient, and every merchant immediately fell silent, because somewhere inside the palace, the Shadow King had just learned that Elara knew the truth.
The bell echoed across the shadow market. Deep, ancient, unmistakable. Every conversation stopped. Every merchant lowered his head. Every lantern seemed to dim. The merchant who had spoken to Elara stepped back immediately. Fear flooded his face. "You need to leave." Elara frowned. "I haven't finished asking questions." "You've already asked too many." The merchant glanced toward the Black Palace, and for the first time, Elara noticed something strange. The shadows in the market were moving. Not naturally, not following their owners. They were all flowing in the same direction, toward the palace, like rivers returning to the sea. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. The Shadow King knew she was here, and somehow he was inviting her, or perhaps summoning her. Neither possibility was comforting. Still, Elara had not crossed half the world to turn back now. She adjusted her satchel, straightened her jacket, and began walking toward the palace. Nobody tried to stop her, which was somehow more frightening than if they had. The streets grew quieter the closer she came. The crowds thinned. The shops disappeared. The blue lanterns became fewer. Soon she found herself alone. Only the sound of her footsteps accompanied her, and the strange movement of countless shadows sliding across the ground toward the palace gates. The black palace towered above her. Up close, it looked even less natural. Its walls seemed carved from solid night. Its towers stretched impossibly high. Its windows reflected stars that did not exist. At its entrance stood two enormous doors. Before Elara could touch them, they opened, by themselves, slowly, silently. A long hallway stretched beyond, and at the far end sat a throne. A single figure occupied it, the Shadow King. Elara walked forward. The doors closed behind her. The sound echoed through the palace. For several moments, neither spoke. The Shadow King simply watched her. He appeared younger than she expected, perhaps 50 years old, tall, elegant, dressed in black robes stitched with silver threads. His face was handsome, sharp, intelligent, and strangely familiar. Then Elara realized why. He looked exactly like King Aldric. Not similar, not resembling. Exactly. The same eyes, the same face, the same features. Only darker, somehow, as though sorrow had carved itself into every line of his expression. Finally he spoke. "Welcome, Elara." His voice was calm, measured. "You already know my secret." "The king's twin brother?" The Shadow King nodded. "Yes." Silence settled between them. Then Elara asked the question that had been burning inside her since the market. "Why did you steal his shadow?" The Shadow King's expression changed. Not anger. Pain. Ancient pain. For a long moment he stared into the darkness above the throne. Then he began speaking. 40 years ago, 2 princes were born. The shadows along the walls stirred, and images appeared, living memories. Elara watched as the story unfolded. 2 infants, twin brothers, one wrapped in gold cloth, the other in silver. Aldric, and another child named Lucian, the Shadow King. They said we were identical. His voice echoed softly through the hall. We laughed together. The memory showed 2 boys running through palace gardens. We studied together. 2 young princes reading beneath a tree. We dreamed together. 2 brothers staring at the stars. Then the vision changed, darkened. A royal chamber, an old prophecy, a frightened king, a desperate queen, and a royal astrologer speaking words that would destroy a family. The Shadow King's voice became quieter. The prophecy said one brother would save the kingdom. The memory shifted, and the other would destroy it. Elara felt her chest tighten. She already knew where this was going. The worst stories always began with fear, and fear rarely made wise choices. The vision showed the king and queen arguing, crying, deciding. Then guards entered a nursery, not for Aldric, for Lucian, a small boy sleeping peacefully, completely unaware. The Shadow King's voice nearly broke. They chose. The memory showed the child being carried away in the middle of the night, exiled, banished, forgotten, while Aldric remained to become king. The vision vanished. Silence filled the throne room. Elara could barely breathe. "They abandoned you." Lucian nodded slowly. "Yes. No anger, no bitterness, just sadness. The kind that remains after decades. But here's the tragedy." His silver eyes met hers. The prophecy was wrong. Everything stopped. What? Lucian stood.
The royal astrologer lied. The shadows around the throne writhed. The prophecy never said I would destroy Valoria. His voice hardened. It said the kingdom would be destroyed if the brothers were separated. Elara stared. The implication hit her immediately. The prophecy had warned them, not condemned them, and because they misunderstood it, they created the very tragedy they feared. Lucian laughed softly, a sad laugh. Humans have always been talented at turning warnings into disasters. For the first time, Elara saw the truth. Lucian wasn't evil. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't even truly a villain. He was simply a man who had spent 40 years carrying a wound that never healed. Then she remembered the king, his fading memories, his disappearing soul. That still doesn't explain the shadow. Lucian's expression darkened. No. He walked toward a tall window overlooking the city and stared at the black star above. Because there is one thing I haven't told you. The palace trembled just slightly. Lucian's face suddenly became grave. Aldric's shadow wasn't stolen. Elara froze. What? Lucian slowly turned toward her, and for the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. Real fear. I took it to save him. A deep rumble echoed beneath the black palace. The walls shook, the shadows along the floor recoiled, and somewhere far below the black palace, something enormous moved. Something that had been sleeping beneath Valoria for 40 years. Something tied to the prophecy. Something that was finally beginning to wake. Lucian's voice dropped to a whisper. The destroyer has found him. The black star pulsed overhead, and beneath the kingdom of Valoria, a pair of ancient golden eyes opened in the darkness. The black palace shook. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The shadows along the walls twisted and trembled, and far beneath both the shadow market and the kingdom of Valoria, something ancient was waking. Elara looked at Lucian. The destroyer? Lucian nodded. For the first time since she had met him, the ruler of the shadow market looked genuinely afraid. The true subject of the prophecy. Another tremor rolled through the palace. The black star above the city pulsed like a heartbeat. 40 years ago, after his exile, Lucian had searched desperately for answers. He had traveled farther than any mortal, into forgotten libraries, through ruined kingdoms, across deserts where even maps refused to go, and eventually he discovered the truth. The prophecy had never been about a brother destroying Valoria. It had been about an ancient creature sleeping beneath the kingdom, a creature older than kings, older than castles, older than recorded history, a being known only as the Hollow King. Long ago, before Valoria existed, the Hollow King had attempted to devour the shadows of the entire world, because shadows were more than darkness. They were memory, identity, soul. Without shadows, people slowly forgot who they were. Without shadows, entire civilizations vanished. The ancient mages of that age had defeated the Hollow King and imprisoned it beneath the land that would one day become Valoria. But before it was sealed away, it uttered a final curse. When the two heirs of light are divided, my prison shall weaken. That was the prophecy. Not a warning about Lucian, not a warning about Aldric. A warning about separation. And 40 years ago, fear had fulfilled the curse. The brothers were separated, the prison weakened, and every year afterward, the Hollow King grew stronger, waiting, watching, until finally, it found Aldric
and began feeding on his shadow. Lucien had stolen the shadow first, not to harm his brother, but to hide it, protect it, keep it beyond the Hollow King's reach. Yet even that was only delaying the inevitable, because the prison was finally breaking, and now the creature was waking. A thunderous roar echoed beneath the world. The palace shook violently. Far away, bells began ringing across Valoria. The final hour had arrived. Lucien turned toward Elara. "We have one chance." "What chance?" The Shadow King looked toward the horizon, toward the distant kingdom, toward the brother he had not seen in 40 years. The prophecy also spoke of a reunion. A pause. Only together may the heirs of light restore what fear divided. Elara immediately understood. The brothers! Lucien nodded. The prison can only be restored if we stand together. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elara smiled. Then let's stop wasting time. And for the first time in decades, Lucien laughed. A real laugh, the laugh of the prince he once had been. Together they left the Black Palace. The journey back to Valoria was unlike any journey Elara had ever taken. The shadow market itself seemed to help them. Bridges formed, lanterns lit, the shadows parted, as if the city understood that its ruler was finally going home. By dawn, they reached the kingdom, and what they found terrified them.
Cracks split the earth. Darkness leaked from beneath the ground. Entire streets were covered in moving shadows. People wandered in confusion, forgetting names, forgetting faces, forgetting themselves. The Hollow King was already feeding. At the center of the capital stood the royal palace. King Aldric waited there, older than ever, weaker than ever. Yet when he saw Lucien, he froze. The years vanished from his eyes. For a moment, they were children again. Two brothers standing in a garden, dreaming beneath the stars. Neither spoke, because some wounds are too old for words. Then Aldric stepped forward and embraced him. Lucien stood motionless, only for a moment. Then he returned the embrace. 40 years of sorrow, 40 years of loneliness, 40 years of regret, breaking apart like ice beneath sunlight. And deep beneath the kingdom, the Hollow King screamed, because the curse was failing. The brothers were together again. The earth exploded. A colossal figure erupted from beneath the capital, towering above castles, above towers, above everything. The Hollow King. Its body was made of living shadow. Its eyes burned like empty suns. Its voice shook the sky itself. "I will not be forgotten." The people fled. The city trembled. The heavens darkened. The creature raised one enormous hand, and the shadows of thousands began tearing away from the ground. Elara looked up. For the first time in this entire adventure, she was afraid, truly afraid. Then Aldric stepped forward, and Lucien stepped beside him, twin brothers, side by side. At last. Lucien reached into his cloak and withdrew a crystal sphere. Inside danced Aldric's missing shadow, perfectly preserved, carefully protected, for 40 years. He handed it to his brother. Aldric took it. The shadow instantly flowed back into place, and the effect was immediate. His memories returned, his strength returned, his soul became whole again. Golden light erupted from both brothers, the same light, the same power, the same blood, separated for decades, united at last. The prophecy awakened. The sky itself seemed to brighten. The two brothers joined hands, and a brilliant beam of light surged into the heavens. The Hollow King roared. The darkness fought back. But the curse had already broken. Fear had divided them. Love had reunited them. And love proved stronger. The shadow giant began cracking, huge fractures across its body. Its roar became a scream, then a whisper, then silence. The Hollow King shattered into 1,000,000 fragments of darkness, which dissolved into the morning sunlight. Gone. Forever. The sky cleared. The black star vanished. The earth grew still. And for the first time in 40 years, Valoria was free. Months later, the kingdom celebrated. King Aldric continued to rule, but never alone, because his brother Lucien finally returned home. Not as the Shadow King, not as an exile, as a prince, as family, as the brother he should always have been. And what of Elara? Well, she refused every reward offered to her. Gold bored her. Titles bored her, palaces bored her, but before she left, Aldric gave her one thing, a silver compass, ancient, beautiful, strange. "What does it point toward?" she asked. The king smiled. "Whatever adventure comes next." Elara laughed, then slipped the compass into her satchel and walked toward the horizon, because there are some people who are not meant to stay in one place. They are meant to chase mysteries, to find lost things, to mend broken stories. And somewhere beyond the 7 forests and 3 silver rivers, another impossible adventure was already waiting. The old stories teach us that monsters are not always defeated by strength. Sometimes they are defeated by understanding. Sometimes the deepest wounds are not caused by enemies, but by fear. And sometimes the greatest treasure we can recover is not gold, nor magic, nor power, but the people we thought we had lost. For shadows may wander, kingdoms may falter, and years may pass like leaves upon a river. Yet love, once found again, can bring even the longest night to an end.